Wake up. Wake up. It's time to wake up. Welcome to Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers, seekers of truth, comparative mythology enthusiasts, and last, but certainly not least, all of you that desperately cling to your confirmation bias. Whether your interest is Atlantis to Zeus, cuneiform to quantum physics, we tackle it all from our quantumly entangled castle, tucked away in the ancient flood-battered Central Pangaean mountain range. We are the one-stop shop for mystery, history, and comparative mythology. We're a podcast dedicated to exploring the ancient, mysterious, and unknown with logic and reason, and where we also theorize the geometric fourth dimension exists and is the spiritual. There will be some additional trigger warnings for this episode. Reproductive topics got mentioned, so this would definitely not be an episode for little ears. Only other trigger warning besides that for this episode is a logical conversation on the fringe. So if applying the Socratic method on the bizarre topics is disturbing to you, you'll want to turn off the podcast right about now. So we've got a really good guest queued up. We've actually already done the interview, and we're going to forgo Psych Facts because the Psych and Spirit episodes, the whole series that we're doing here, it's kind of a conglomeration of Psych Facts, more or less. But I've got Isaiah with here. Isaiah with here. Good grief. Isaiah with me here today instead of my wife, the lovely Miss Queen Madison. So say hi, Isaiah.
Mrs., right? Is that what she would say?
The Mrs. Queen Madison. It was a play on stuff from like the last couple episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So unless you have anything you want to add before we jump into the conversation here, we'll just transition right in.
Sounds good.
All right. All right, and today's guest is Vicki Joy Anderson. She's an author, biblical scholar, and expert on spiritual warfare and sleep paralysis. With a dual degree in English and Bible from the University of Northwestern and continued studies in Koine Greek, apologetics, and demonology, she brings a deeply grounded spiritual lens to fringe topics most churches tend to avoid. She's traveled the world on missions and now shines light into the darkest corners, helping people break free from spiritual oppression through truth and faith in Christ. You can find out more at VickiJoyAnderson.com and purchase her book, They Only Come Out at Night, and at lamarzulli.net. The links for this will be available in the episode description. So, Vicki, how's it going? It's good to have you here. We've been planning this for a while. But yeah, it's good to have you in a call with us here.
Yeah.
Of course, soon as
For having me. This is going to be great.
I think we have a faulty connection there. We barely got anything you said.
Oh, man. Yeah, straight out of the chute with the tech issues, huh?
Yep. Oh, yeah. We had a whole bunch of tech issues before we started recording here. So it is what it is. But no, it's good to have you here. So, but yeah. So I guess to start off here, because I did read your book, but our listeners are kind of coming into this not really knowing much about you, who you are. Can you maybe explain a little bit of like sleep paralysis to us and what your perspective is on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have experienced sleep paralysis off and on, more on than off for the greater part of my life. I'm kind of turning around the corner here to 53 years old. My earliest memory of it was about 3 or 4 years old, though I have other peripheral incidences of things in my childhood that I remember that I think give way to the fact that it was probably happening earlier. I remember at more like 2 years old telling my mom I was afraid of the shadows on the wall. I was afraid of the dark and things. So I kind of think this has been with me most of my life. And even though I haven't had a classic pinned down on the bed, can't move sleep paralysis experience in probably 8 to 12 years, it's kind of hard to pin these things down. But I have a lifelong, to this day, experiences with what I would call astral abductions. Very, very familiar with the mall world, and I have some theories as to what that could be, and very interested in that topic. If anyone is interested, you can go on and read the subreddits of the mall world. Very fascinating, sort of. Think it's been going on since about the 80s. Most of us that have had it trace it back to about the 80s. This was probably predates the back rooms. So that plays into it as well. So most people with sleep paralysis, everybody's probably had it once or twice. You can have it when you're stressed out or when you're jet lagged or you're tired. But the people that have had lifelong sleep paralysis, which is the demographic that I work with the most, we are the people that would consider ourselves to be targeted individuals, even those of us that would consider ourselves to be Christian or have, some sort of direct spiritual warfare knowledge. It's very hard to shake this stuff because there's usually some sort of invitation or permissions, some legal loophole that gives these things the right to have access to you. And that can be either something, a door you opened, but for most of us, when you're talking about people that have had this since they were 2 or 3 years old, you're probably talking about something more ancestral or bloodline related. It can have to do with all sorts of things, and we can get into it if you want. But a lot of the people that have the lifelong attacks, which is sleep paralysis, it could be night terrors, it could be UFO abduction related things, seeing manifestations of entities, astral projection, spontaneous astral projection, astral abductions, as well as bizarre kind of wonky dreamscape experiences. A lot of that, you're talking about people that have come out of some extreme childhood trauma of some kind. And it doesn't necessarily have to be abuse or SA. It can be ritual abuse. It can be uh, anything. It can be medical trauma, weather related trauma, adoptions, death of a parent. It doesn't, everyone always goes to, uh, the, the, the big, the big ones, but it doesn't even have to be that serious. If a child has had trauma, that really, I am finding, opens up the door to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean that sounds like kind of what you're saying too, having memories as far back as like 2, 3, 4 range, where you have these very sharp memories. That, from my perspective, having a bachelor's degree in psychology, that does sound like there's probably a little bit more trauma involved there, because there's typically not memories that far back for most people. But I'm kind of interested about what exactly this mole world is. I haven't heard of that, so let's define that one.
Yeah, yep. So um, I sort of just found out that this is a phenomenon and that there's a name to it. I have had these dreams probably for the last, well, since the 80s. And it's not just a mall, but there are these recurring uh, areas that you revisit in your dream. So it's about topography and geography. It's the dream ring. When you talk about a reoccurring dream, it's you have the same exact dream over and over and over again. Same characters, same script, same everything's predictable. And with the mall world, it's the locations that are recurring, but the characters and the interactions and the way that these dreams morph and begin and end don't have to be the same at all. And so they've dubbed it the mall world, but it's very much. I wish, guys, I knew a little bit more about um, video games, because I think that there would be a whole bunch of terminology. I could take whole paragraphs of information and a gamer could say, oh, that's and fill it in the blank with one word. But because that's not really my wheelhouse, a lot of people think that this mall world is a grand simulation, because it's not just a mall, it's a whole virtual city in the
Hmm.
dreamscape. And so there are reoccurring shopping malls. Here's some of the most common things that you'll hear. There are a couple of hotels, there's an amusement park, there is several indoor swimming pools. There's a carnival. I've never been to the forest or the underground or the ocean areas, but many people have. Um, what's really fascinating to me about the mall is it seems to be a personalized experience. Because I hear a lot of people online who are probably people who are younger than me talking about the arcade and all of the video game stores that they're going into and how they're looking at video games. And I am in my mall, I am always going into bookstores, record stores, music stores. So there's a store that sells guitars that I'm always going into. There is a couple of bookstores that I go into all the time, and everything on the shelves is something that in real life you'd be interested in. So it's almost like it's a tailor-made experience. And so what I originally thought was that it was a simulation and maybe they were testing us. Like maybe they were trying to see how does this sort of like grand anthropological experiment, like how does a human being react when they're in a high stress situation? Because a lot of times once you're in one of these areas, the hotel, the swimming pool, the amusement park, the mall, you feel fine. There's nothing sort of like oppressive or demonic or astral about it. It's just a normal dream. Now, if you're a lucid dreamer like I am, it'll be familiar and you'll go, oh no, not the mall again. Or like, oh no, like you'll kind of have this dread, but it's not the same sort of dread as a sleep paralysis experience. It's more of like a, oh, I'm going to spend the next hour trying to find my way out. And so, but what ends up happening is a few minutes into the dream, whether you're at the amusement park, the mall, the hotel, the swimming pool, the bathrooms are a very interesting um, uh, field of study. That the bathrooms in the mall world are just so frustrating. But what happens about a few minutes into these dreams is the whole landscape will change. The mall will close, all the lights will go out. You're the only one left. Some people, a lot of people talk about either being lost in the mall or being chased in the mall, like security guards are coming after them. I have the former. I'm always lost in the mall and it's locked. And the all the areas in the mall world, no matter where you are, if it's the mall, the hotel, wherever, as soon as you try to retrace your steps, the scenery changes. It's not it's you're still in the mall, but the stores are all in a different order. And now the flights of stairs and the escalators are in different places. If you're in the amusement park, you're on the roller coaster, and all of a sudden you realize the track is an impossible feat of physics. There's no way your car is going to stay on that track. And or you're stuck on it, you're stuck in the ride, or the car disappears and now all of a sudden you're on foot and you're trying to navigate your way down off of this massive roller coaster. And a lot of times the spatial realities morph on you. So let's say you're stuck on something that's maybe 10 feet high and you're like, okay, maybe I could jump without breaking my leg. And then you get ready to go and all of a sudden you're 30 feet high now. And it's constantly like changing. And so there's a point where it gets very disturbing and off-putting, dark, or you're being chased or you're lost. And people report a lot of the same sceneries. And I always see tons of people in the mall or in the swimming pool. Like there's always a lot of people there, but we seem to never, if rarely, interact. It's like we're all there, but we're not talking to each other. So it's a very strange phenomenon. And so for the longest time, I kind of thought this was a simulation. They're trying to see how do human beings react under stress? What happens if you're being chased or if you're lost? What sort of ingenuity do you have? Are you going to figure your way out of this? The next time you dream, are you going to retain where that exit was and be able to find it? And so I was going along with that theory for quite a while. And I don't think that the theory is wrong, but I have since stumbled upon the fact that it may be a little bit more sinister than that. And what I'm starting to theorize, this is a work in progress, is that these mall world dreams may be an elaborate screen memory.
Can you say that?
So
Can you say
for
that part
listeners who might
about
not
what
be
they
familiar,
are
that is
again?
of UFO abductees. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for those not familiar, okay, I'll back up. I'm beginning to think that in addition to a simulation, that these dreams of the mall world are actually elaborate screen memories. So for those not familiar with the term screen memory, this is straight out of like the vocabulary of UFO abduction the world, right? A screen memory is when they wake up with, instead of remembering the alien grays or being on a table or being part of the experiment, they'll remember seeing 4-foot owls or a 4-foot chipmunk, or these 3-4 foot aliens will disguise themselves behind the visage of an animal. We see this. We see screen memories and sleep paralysis all the time too. In fact, I believe a lot of the times when we think we are waking up in our bedroom, that is many times an elaborate screen memory, because there's usually a glitch. Many times there'll be something in your bedroom that doesn't exist in the real world. Your bedspread will be a different color, or the window is on the wrong wall. If you are lucid and you are observant enough and you look around, you will usually find one minor detail that is askew. And that's kind of like your totem, to borrow a word from the movie Inception. The DiCaprio character, as soon as he knew he could spin that top, he knew he was in the real world, right? And it's similar in sleep paralysis. If you've got the wherewithal when you are in a frightened state to look around the surroundings of your alleged bedroom, you will usually find something that is off, one minor detail that's off. This is also likened to the scene in the Matrix where Neo sees the black cat and he sees the loop, he sees the glitch in the Matrix. And so these are our clues. So what I think is happening, I have spoken to a lot of people who have either been experiencers of the UFO abduction phenomenon, or they have been survivors of SRA or RA, which are various types of ritual abuse. They will talk a lot about screen memories. And this could also, if you want to strip all of this of the spiritual, and you are of a scientific mind and you just want a very scientific explanation, this could be the genius interworkings of our mind, because we do have the ability to dissociate when we are in extreme trauma, and it's a protective measure. And so I am beginning to theorize that these mall world dreams are screen memories, distractions that are going on, so that we don't remember where we really are or what's really going on. And namely, let's just say, the most cliche examples. Let's say you're on the table and the grays are surrounding you and they're doing some sort of experiment. Or let's say you're in a situation astrally where you are taking part in some sort of a ritual. And let's say there's a sacrifice involved, or something that you would be absolutely traumatized if you were participating in the real world. I believe that dream can be green memory, a distraction, something to keep us occupied, something to keep us in the dark, so that when we wake up, we might have memory of a really weird dream, but we're not going to remember what we perhaps were really being dragged into up there. And so this is all kind of a new line of research for me, guys. And the reason I'm kind of talking about this is for other people that have been to the mall world, this is how we learn. We talk to each other. We say, what do you think? This is one of my theories. Have you had this experience? Because we're not going to come to the bottom of this if we sweep it under the carpet and don't talk about it, and we just call people crazy, or we call them schizophrenic. And for those of us that have been to these places and had these experiences, some of these experiences are similar but unique. Some of them are tailor-made to our own religious worldview, our own perception of the world, our own philosophies. And so we'll be in the same places but have much different experiences. And that doesn't mean my experience is right and yours is wrong. And we have to, as experiencers and survivors of these type of things, when we have different experiences or we come to different conclusions, we have to stop attacking each other, because people outside of this experience aren't going to be on our side. They're going to continue to call us crazy and say that we're just attention seeking. And so I would love to see a little bit more camaraderie amongst the experiencing community, that we can have different experiences and we can come to different conclusions from our experiences. But even if someone has had a radically different experience, or they come to a radically different religious or worldview interpretation of their experience, if we can settle down and not attack each other, we will learn so much from the collective information being the conversation. You don't have to agree with what everyone says. You don't have to agree with their conclusions or their religion or their worldview. But the fact is, if we listen instead of attack, I don't have to agree with every single thing a person says or believes to glean information and knowledge from their experience. And so the more puzzle pieces we have, I think the more we're going to be able to unwind this web. This agenda has been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years, you guys. And a lot of previous generations have been stymied over it and have been in complete fear and bondage to it, because we've lived in prior cultures. You weren't allowed to talk about it. You couldn't talk about it. And we are a privileged generation. We can talk openly about this stuff. And so we're going to get a lot faster if we set aside the differences and listen to each other. Hey, throw any, like, I'll take myself as an example. Let's talk an hour today. You could throw away 50% of what I'm saying, or my conclusions, or my worldview, or my perspective of it. But as someone who has been in this space for 50 years and has talked to hundreds of other people since writing the book, you don't have to have the same conclusions. And I don't have to have the same conclusions as you either. But the fact of the matter is, we have so much to gain, and so many people can be set free from the torment of this if we can figure it out. And I'll end on this point, guys. There really are three main categories. And I'm not saying that there's no other categories, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, there are people who have these experiences and are completely indifferent to them. And then there are people that have these experiences and think that there's something very, very spiritual about it, and they long for this experience. And then there's the people that have this experience that have a gut feeling, there's something not good about this. I don't want this experience. So in summary, there's people who are seeking this out. There are people who are not seeking it out, but are being targeted and want nothing to do with it. And then there's people that are just indifferent. And so a lot of times where the arguments lie, and the differences of opinion is, there's the people that are seeking this out and think it's wonderful, and think that these entities and these beings are our friends, and they're teaching us and educating us and helping us. They're usually not going to necessarily side with, understand, or believe those of us that have been targeted and want nothing to do with this. We just want our lives back, want a good night's sleep. We don't like being exhausted for 24 to 48 hours after this happens. We don't like the confusion of it. We don't like the potential negative, nefarious implications that we believe are present because of our particular worldview of who these entities are and where they are and what their agendas are. And that's where the two sides have to come together. Whether you're enjoying and desiring and benefiting from the experience, or you want to get rid of it, we have to at least come into these conversations with a mutual respect. If someone is saying my experience is not pleasant, then we shouldn't foist on them, no, just stick with it, you'll love it. And we just have to be respectful, because there is, even within the community of experiencers, there is a massive rift between whether or not this experience is awesome or terrible.
No, I agree with you entirely that, whatever your experiences are with this, and just in general, even, stepping outside of like the sleep paralysis and like lucid dreaming, astral and all that, we should be coming together to seek whatever the underlying truth is. And that's really what we're all about here. But anything you wanted to hit question wise on all that, Isaiah?
I got a few questions. I guess I haven't ever experienced this that I remember. So I guess a question just to kind of lay a groundwork. Um, what would the different, what would, I guess I'm asking if you could give a breakdown of the different states and or dimensions that someone can be in. So you've got, waking and sleeping are kind of the defaults that we all know about. And then the sleep paralysis sort of seems to be a little bit in between where you're able to perceive to some extent, but you're not able to act, at least physically. But it sounds like there's at least multiple beyond those even.
Yeah. Oh man, that is a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. And that's a great question. So let me break down a few of them. And again, I always tell people when I throw out a handful of things, that doesn't mean I've come up with everything in the world, right?
Hmm.
So, as far as what I can just throw out here off the top of my head, you've got the waking, like you said, you've got the sleeping. Now, the sleeping is where it gets complicated. Okay. You have very brief windows every night of altered states of consciousness. There's a brief window of like 10 seconds, give or take, where you haven't quite fallen asleep yet, or you're waking up, but you're not 100% awake. And these are brief altered states of consciousness. And depending on if you're having your experience as you're falling asleep or as you're waking up, the medical official scientific terms for that is hypnopompic and hypnagogic. So coming in of or coming out of sleep. And the reason why people do psychedelics and mushrooms and ayahuasca and they do these various things is if you want to intentionally get yourself up into the astral realm, you have to be in an altered state of consciousness. Now, is that going to be true now and going forward? Probably not, because we have technology now that is doing the work for us that's going to make this accessible to the masses. In centuries past, you had to be an adept at this, and you had to have a spirit guide, and you had to learn these skills, and it took great amounts of arcane knowledge and practice. And we're getting to the point now where this stuff is so prevalent on social media, and there's technology out there, and there's frequencies out there, and there's binaural beats that can put you into a state of brain entrainment and can open up altered states of consciousness. And there's other things that can be done. So it's going to be much more accessible to the average human being without all sorts of um, a lifetime of practicing with the guru kind of a thing. So there's lucid dreaming, which is a very interesting type of dreaming. And in the new age sense, lucid dreaming would loosely be defined as you are awake or alert or conscious in your dreams. And in the new age sense, this is a preferable gifting to have, because once you are conscious in your dreams, you can control whatever happens. And so this is where things like shifting, reality shifting comes into play. So most people will use lucid dreaming to their advantage to create dream worlds of their choosing. And this can be saying, okay, I want to be in the Harry Potter world. I want to be in a DC or a Marvel comic world. I want to rule my dream. I want to be beautiful. I want to be a princess. You can create. When you lucid dream, you're able to sort of manifest into reality whatever you want. So from the opposite perspective, for people who don't desire to be in the astral realm or the back rooms or the mall world or anything like this, once they become lucid, they use it as a means of escape. They do it, that's the exact opposite. Rather than using lucid dreaming to get deeper and deeper into the back rooms, they're using it to get the heck out. So they're using their power to manifest to, like if you're trapped in a room, you can say, I need a door, and a door will appear. Or you're outside and you're being chased, I need a car, and then a car will appear. And or you can even have yourself wake up. You can say, wake up, you're dreaming, wake up, things like that. So when I was talking earlier about the two categories of the people that desire to be here and the people that want out, they will also use lucid dreaming in different ways. And so from a physiological, scientific perspective, when we sleep, if you want to talk about what it means to be asleep in a natural dream state, what happens is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex shuts down. That's the part of the brain that does all of the higher functioning. and it problem solves, it does conflict resolution, it determines all of the potential consequences of decision making, it processes our stress, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason why we wake up completely well rested after 5 to 8 hours of sleep is because that high functioning part of our brain has shut down and gotten to sort of defrag and take a nap. When we're lucid dreaming, or we are in these back rooms or the mall world or the astral realm, astral plane, whatever you want to call it, um, if you're lucid, you have access to your conscious mind. You have access to memories, your worldview, your belief system. You're aware of your name, your age, your birthday, where you were born. You know who your parents are. You're making conscious. You have a conscious dialogue, but you also have an inner monologue in a dream. And the inner monologue would match the inner monologue that you have in real life. You're typically not doing things. If you're wise, you're not making decisions in the dream world that you wouldn't make in real life. Because everything that happens in this dreamscape, it does in one way or the other carry into the physical realm. There are consequences for those things. It's very interesting. This is why a lot of people. I'll give you an easy example. There are people that have dreams that their spouse has cheated on them, and they wake up the next day and they're upset, and they're maybe even bringing it up to the spouse, and then all of a sudden they have this paranoia and they're checking the spouse's phone. It's a dream.
Hmm.
Why are they manifesting the actual physical and mental anomalies that would accompany if that had really happened in real life? There's this we can't separate the soul and the mind and the imagination and the memories and from reality. We carry those with us back into the physical realm as attachments. And so when we're lucid, if we are wise, and this is where shifting and reality shifting and lucid dreaming and astral projecting can get dangerous, is a lot of people, they feel safe in those places to do things that they would never do in real life, because we're told our whole life it's just a dream, it's just a dream. But if you are wise, you would not make any decisions in the dream world contrary to decisions you would make in the real world. And that's perhaps a controversial blanket statement to make to some of the listeners, and I understand that. So the lucid dreaming, that's typically when you wake up the next day very exhausted, very tired. Then we can get into all of this astral, like whether you're in the astral or not. And there's a lot of different words for the astral, and people use them interchangeably, which may or may not be accurate. But people will say the astral realm, the astral plane, the second heaven, the third heaven, the dreamscape. There's all sorts of names. And I think depending on who you're talking to, they don't necessarily all mean the same thing, because a lot of these terms have not been defined or universally accepted with an official definition. I will give some biblical insight into this. Because this is my area of in biblical demonology and in biblical studies, we get a little bit of a clue as to where these different places are in Ephesians 6:12 and in 2 Corinthians 12, I believe. We have two different Greek words, and Ephesians and Corinthians were both written by the same author. So we know that this is intentionally two different words are being chosen, because this author understands these are two different places. So in Ephesians 6:12, when Paul is talking about the heavenly places, and this is where all of the enemies of God and mankind dwell, because it says our battle's not against flesh and blood, it's not against each other, it's not against fellow human beings, it is against these fallen angelic beings that live in these heavenly places. And these are the fallen archons, the principalities, the spiritual forces of wickedness and of darkness. And the heavenly places in the Greek is the word epuranios. And if you dig deeper than just like the Greek Strong's dictionary, and you go into, say, like the Thayer's concordance, it will specifically say that in the context of Ephesians 6:12, this epuranios, these heavenly places where the enemies of mankind dwell, is in a dimensional plane between the heavens, which we would mean the sky when we look up and we see the blue sky and the clouds and the sun, moon, and stars. It is a dimensional plane that lies betwixt the blue sky and the throne room of God. So it is not the throne room. That is what we get in 2 Corinthians 12, where Paul, who's likely talking about himself, says, I know a man who once went into the third heaven, and whether he was really there or was caught up in a vision, I do not know. So notice his confusion. He was likely in some sort of a dream state or an altered state, because when he woke up, he wasn't really sure if he was really there or if he just had a dream. But in that context, he does not use the word epiranios. He uses a very closely related word, uranos, I believe. Epi-uranos, epi is a qualifier prefix in Greek. It means with, kind of like church versus parachurch, right? It's kind of like our word para. So the Uranos is the third heaven. That's how it translates into the English. And there he was actually dealing with the throne room of the creator God. And we see other people that saw glimpses into that Uranos, that third heaven, where they saw the Son of Man sitting on the throne as a lamb slain. John in the book of Revelation, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So just so people understand, there is a massive difference between the second heaven and the third heaven. And where I see a lot of confusion with the people that I talk to a lot of devout, born again Christians who have what they believe are these wonderful Holy Spirit flying missions up into the throne room of God, where they're seeing angels, where it really, really feels to me like that's deceptive, and they probably were in the astral realm. And I'm not saying people don't ever see the throne room, because they do, but and then I see the opposite, where I see a lot of people who are not biblically well read, not religious, not of the church ilk, that have all these experiences where they see angels of light, and it's wonderful, and they likewise think that they're in heaven and they're seeing angels and they're seeing dead loved ones and getting wonderful messages and knowledge, where it is a replica of that Uranos, and they're probably just in a wing of the astral realm where that is being recreated. Here's the thing. If none of us have ever been to the throne room of God, if we see a counterfeit, we're not going to recognize it, because how would we know? It's going to look fantastic to us. We've never seen anything like it. So this is where we really have to test every being, every entity. In fact, I've noticed, you guys, a recent shift. In the old days, in the 1960s and 70s, when they talked about the astral plane, they would talk about angels, masters. It was like very spiritual language. And now I'm seeing a digression, a dilution of the language, where now people are just talking about dream characters. And there's nothing really scary about a dream character. Now it just looks like you're in the middle of theater, and these are the cast of characters. And they'll even tell you, if you're lucid dreaming or you're shifting or you're astral projecting, to interact with as many dream characters, and it could be someone you recognize. It could be someone you don't recognize. It could be someone you recognize who is no longer among the living. And I just feel that wherever you are on the spectrum of whether this is good, evil, or some people are kind of lie in the middle, where there's levels of the astral realm, and if you're on the bottom, you're with the lower vibrational riffraff, but if you ascend higher than that, you'll get to the good guys. There's references in the biblical scriptures to Satan being able to disguise himself as an angel of light. So we know he originally was an angel. And a lot of Christians seem to think that when he fell, he turned into this ugly guy. There isn't a chapter or verse that says that. He was originally one of the most, if not the most beautiful of all angels. And we're told from the scriptures he can still pose in that form. And so I would just advise anyone, I don't care what your religious upbringing is or what your beliefs are. Um, there are things, New Agers will tell you this, astral projectors will tell you this, witches, Wiccans, and atheists, and agnostics, and occultists will tell you this. You have to be careful who you rub shoulders with in this dimensional plane, because there are wolves in sheep's clothing. There are tricksters up there. Paul Stobbs talks about all of the clowns and the jesters in the fractal realm that a lot of people run into when they do ayahuasca. So even people without one religious or Christian or churched bone in their body will tell you you've got to be very careful. And I think that that's the thing, that the piece that's left out in a lot of the TikToks where it talks about shifting and how fun it is. There are a lot of mental and physical and spiritual repercussions that will follow you into the physical realm upon waking if you just indiscriminately interact with whatever being or entity you run into in these spiritual dimensions. And um a lot of things up there are human because you've got other people up there with you, but these things can also metamorphose into, hey, you think it's your grandma, you think it's your best friend. They're very, very clever. I don't necessarily think that they're smarter than we are. We're a pretty advanced human race. We're not stupid. We figured out a lot. So I don't necessarily think it's that they're super smart and we're stupid, but I think it's that they have more information than we do. They have more puzzle pieces than we do. I sometimes compare it to a diamond. We can see about 3 or 4 facets of this diamond. We have like a one-dimensional view of this diamond, and they've got it in their hand and they can turn it in all directions and see all of the facets of this three-dimensional object. These spiritual beings have more information than we do. We're short-sighted, and we could use Adam and Eve as an example. They were deceived because they didn't understand at that point the repercussions of their actions, because they didn't have as much information as the serpent, as the seraphim. So I kind of went off on a wild tangent there, Isaiah, but there are many aspects of the sleep world. When we're asleep and when we're dreaming, you really can't just say I was asleep or I was having a dream, because there are many layers of wakefulness and lucidity and uh, wakefulness, even when we think we're asleep, or even when we think we're awake in our room and we might not actually be awake yet. So it's sort of scary how out of touch we can even be with our own physiology, to not even know necessarily. But we're in good company, because even Paul couldn't quite figure out what happened to him there when he saw the third heaven.
So I'm curious to get your take then, because you mentioned lucid dreaming and that you are a lucid dreamer. So is lucid dreaming in of itself dangerous? And where's the dividing line between like controlling your dreams versus like going off more into danger? And then second question I'll say as well is, you mentioned testing entities. How exactly do you recommend testing these entities from your experience?
Yeah. So can you repeat the first question? Because you sketched out on me there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, lucid dreaming, is it dangerous? Where's the dividing line between controlling your dreams versus like being in actual danger? And then the second question is, how do you test these entities that you encounter?
Yep. Great questions. Okay. So with lucid dreaming, and this is where I'm going to get in trouble with your Christian listeners potentially, right? Here's what happens. We hear a word in a particular context for 40, 50, 60 years, and the Christian has a whole list of words that are trigger words. And if we even hear the word, we just throw our arms up and say, that's new age, that's bad, that's a cult, we don't listen, we don't even necessarily know what some of this stuff is. And lucid dreaming is one of those things. We tend to just associate it 100% with new age and don't even talk about it and don't even say the word. But here's the deal. if we have a capacity physiologically where in our dreams, our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex on its own can flip on and warn us of danger, that says to me that that was part of our brain's physiology. It's something that's baked into the design of our brain. And so I don't think that lucid dreaming in and of itself is bad. It's how you use it. Similar to take a knife. Okay. I can take a knife and I can go into an alley late at night and I can stab someone with it. Or I can take that same knife into an operating room and I can cut someone's sternum open, put in a new heart, and save their life. So you can't say that the knife itself is evil or good. Whatever hand is wielding that knife, whatever free will is attached to that knife and how they choose to use it is what makes that knife frightening or an object of life-saving. And so I think it's the same thing with lucid dreaming. It depends on who's got it and what they're using it for. And so is it dangerous? Potentially it is. But by the same token, if you are in a dreamscape that's dangerous, it's full of low vibrational beings that are there to trick you, chase you, abduct you, experiment on you, or transform your ideology or your worldview to something that's false, then I would say lucid dreaming is actually your lifeboat out of there. But if you're there and you're intrigued or you're titillated or you don't have the wherewithal, like you're in over your head and you are falling for all of the things that are bringing you deeper and deeper into the dream world, and you're not recognizing some of the covenant symbols that you're making with these entities as they're offering you drinks and wine and tea and cake and bread, and you see these things. If you don't understand the symbols, the covenant symbols, and you're receiving all the things and you're going all the places you're told to go, we have to maintain our free will in these dream spaces. I'll give you a quick little example and then I'll move on to the second part of your question. I had a dream the other day and it was very bizarre. And it was one of those dreams where me and two other people were told to stand on this little tightrope that was like 2 inches off the ground and balance on this tightrope. And then we had to hold this thing that was like a medicine ball. It was like kind of like a bowling ball without the holes in it. And it was very heavy. And so we were just trying to see who could balance on it. And then, like I told you, these dream worlds can morph. So all of a sudden, I realized I wasn't 2 inches off the ground. I was like 20 feet in the air and we were in like an auditorium where even though they were in shadow, there were bleachers with a whole bunch of people watching. And all of a sudden I realized I'm balancing on this wire, holding this very heavy medicine ball. And I start to be afraid of the height and afraid I'm going to fall. And so they told the guy, and he took this ladder like down. And then they told the second guy, you can drop the medicine ball and you can come down. So he dropped it and he climbed down. And then they weren't saying anything to me. And the longer and longer I had to stand there, the more scared I was getting. And I was like losing my balance and I was becoming fearful. So I said, can I come down? And they said, no. And I stood there and I became lucid in the sense that I remembered I have a free will. Who are these people? I'm not beholden to them. They're not my master. So without permission, I threw the ball down in disgust and climbed down the ladder. And I was storming off. And I was surrounded by, these people. You're in trouble. You are not supposed to do that. You are going to be in so much trouble, like trying to stir up fear in me. And I said, I'm not going to be in trouble. I don't have to do anything. What kind of a weird world is it where you have to sit on a tightrope with a medicine ball? This is ridiculous. And as soon as I saw through the facade, the dream immediately ended. And I can't remember if it just shifted to another dream or if I woke up. But a lot of people will tell you in these dreams where they feel like they're being tested or observed or chased, that once you figure out, once you remember, I'm a free agent, I have a free will, I'm not beholden to do things that people are telling me to do. Once you figure out that you don't have to participate in what they're telling you you have to participate in, whether that's eating something, drinking something, going somewhere. Once you figure that out, you'll either wake up or you'll immediately shift into another brand new escape the room situation, and you'll have to start from scratch from that one. So that kind of plays into the second part of your question, is how do you test these spirits? So what I was just telling you now, that's kind of the carte blanche. That's what I would tell everybody, regardless of your worldview or your spiritual beliefs, or whether or not you're churched or unchurched, or what you believe about God. You can test those spirits in the dream world. Now, this is tricky because a lot of people who are lucid aren't always lucid.
Mm.
So you've got people like me, and where 50% of the time when someone comes and offers you something to eat, you'll be like, heck no, I'm not eating something. I don't know. No way. But then there's other times where I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, I ate it. Why did I eat it? Why did I eat it? And
Mm.
so um, we're inconsistent because sometimes we have an awareness in the dream state and sometimes we don't. But if we have an awareness in the dream state, or we prepare ourselves before we go to bed with wanting that awareness, um, you can train yourself to do this. And it's quite easy, but most people don't do it because most people don't take their dreams seriously. And a lot of people don't even remember them. And even if they do, they just think they're silly. But if you take this kind of stuff seriously, if you can go to bed and, or you're just telling yourself, um, I'm going to have my eyes wide open in this dream state. I am not going to be fooled. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. You can learn to acquire that protection and that ability to watch your back. And so you can actually test these beings and entities and spirits in the dream, um, by refusing to do what they want to do, because they're sort of, they'll start by being very, very nice. Oh, let's just do this. And it'll feel like you have a choice. But if you resist them, uh, you'll notice they get nervous. Like, no, 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 you'll like it. No, oh no, come on. If you continue to resist, then they will get angry. Just do it. And once you get past the anger phase, then you're in the situation where you got to get out of there. You got to wake up, or you need to use your abilities to, manifest that car or that door, or punch them in the face, or call out for Jesus. Everybody's got their different things that they do. So that's what I would tell the average person who really doesn't want a spiritual answer. But for those who are of more of a church slash Christian slash Bible persuasion, we're actually told outright in 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, test every spirit to know whether it
Mm.
is of God. Meaning, is this being from the second heaven or the third heaven, right? Because here's where it gets really tricky, guys. Pretty much every example we have in scripture of someone who ran into an angelic being who was a good guy, quote unquote, um, when people ran into angels, messengers to bear them good tidings or to tell them something, they were terrified. They fainted. They were scared. So we cannot use our emotions as the sole litmus test for whether or not something's good or bad, or safe or unsafe. Because a lot of times we can be in the presence of an angel of light and feel orgasmically wonderful and love, and I understand the meaning of life, and it's wonderful, and it's bad. It's someone who's lying to you. And on the flip side, you can run into a being or an angelic being who has been sent to you straight from God, and you might be terrified because you're now talking to something that's been in the presence of holiness. So you cannot judge whether you're safe or unsafe based upon your dopamine levels or your fear levels. So when it says in 1 John 4:1 to test every spirit to know whether it is of God, what that means for a religious person is, when you wake up, you evaluate that scenario in the dream world, who you were talking to, the conversation that was had, what you were asked to be doing, what you were participating in. and you measure that up against scripture. And if something doesn't measure up, you know that it's not of God, because he's
Mm.
not a liar and he's not inconsistent. So I like to give different answers, because there's the religious people that are really looking for the biblical answer. And there it is. It's 1 John 4:1. That's how you test the spirits. But most of the people, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but a lot of the people that I talk to, or who call me, and a lot of the shows that I go on, um, this is not really a Christian or a religious topic, but it is a very spiritual topic. And so I don't want to offend a lot of the Christians that are somewhat disgusted with me, because I'm not just, fire hosing people. But at the same time, I also want everyone to understand that without attaching labels, this is an extremely spiritual experience. And I think that people that have experienced that know it. But if you go online and you look at all the official narratives, they downgrade all of this to just narcolepsy, sleep apnea, breathing issues at night, trauma. And those things are all involved. And those are all things that can exacerbate your experience or keep you in the dream state longer. Um, but I think most people who have gone through this, it's really fascinating, guys. I have talked to Muslims, agnostics, and atheists who have had this experience, and without even realizing it, as they're explaining their sleep paralysis to me, they will, I think, even somewhat unconsciously use words evil,
Hmm.
hell, demonic. And it's almost as if instinctively, whether you have that worldview or not, people understand this wasn't just a nightmare. It wasn't that piece of pizza I ate but right before I went to bed. There's something more to this, because the people that have experienced it, we've had nightmares. We've had real nightmares. We've had the dreams where we show up at school and we're buck naked, right? We've all had the nightmares, right? When you compare a bad dream or a nightmare to these experiences, there are too many supernatural elements that accompany it. Not to mention the fact that this is a collective experience where men
Hmm.
and women and children in every country, every language, every people group, going all the way back for thousands of years, have documented these experiences. Why are we all collectively having the same dream? Why is it the same entities? Why do they show up in the same area of the room? Why is it a shared collective experience? And there's smart people out there, guys, who could come up with really scientific, medical, philosophical, anthropological explanations. We can talk about, well, we've all read about it on the internet, or you become a self-fulfilling prophecy when you think about it too much. I've obviously I've heard all those explanations. Um, and it, like anything, any, we can strip God or spirituality or religion out of every single conversation. In fact, we primarily live in a world that has done that and gotten very good at it. But I do think that most people who have had the experience more than once, if they're being intellectually honest, will tell you there's something extraordinarily different and supernatural about this collective experience. And when you proportionately different about these experiences.
No, that was a really good, profound answer. Thank you. Because I mean, like I was thinking too, it's like if you have all these people that are having the same experience. It's like, can you really just chalk that up to brain chemistry and the same amount of neurons firing? And then I also liked in your book as well, you seemed incredibly cautious with a lot of this stuff, and so I appreciate that you're taking a not throwing the baby out with the bathwater approach to this. Because you seem like cautious of a lot of things like yoga and all of that, and a lot of these like like the types of movies you watch and everything. And so from a Christian perspective, I can tell you have you approach us with a lot of discernment. And so the fact that you can say, hey, lucid dreaming is not necessarily bad, that speaks a lot to me, to be like, okay, well, someone that's really cautious about these things is saying that, hey, this can be good, this can be bad. So that was a very well thought out, researched answer, and I appreciate that. But Isaiah, do you have any questions you want to throw her way?
Yeah, so I think I've heard of the concept that these sort of experiences may happen to people at times where they don't later remember. And I guess I'm
Yes.
wondering, what would be the most common evidence of that? Could it be like some sort of fear that is difficult to explain, or what exactly would that usually look like?
Yeah, great question. So I like to kind of compare this to something that's happening in the world of science, because this is one of those situations when you talk about things that are supernatural or spiritual, or they're in a different dimension or a spiritual realm. The skeptics come out of the woodwork and they say everything has to line up to the scientific method. But that's not an intellectually honest answer, and I'll tell you why. We now know about dark matter, and scientists will tell you we don't know what it is, we don't know where it is, and we can't see it, and we can't prove it's there. But the reason why we know matter is real and it does exist is because of the gravitational effects that it has on everything that surrounds it. So you can't necessarily take the dark matter and examine it, but you can take everything that is being pulled into its gravitational pull and say everything around this dark matter is acting contrary to how it should be acting. And it's the same thing with sleep paralysis. You really can't prove it. Um, every once in a while, are you going to be able to tell someone's having sleep paralysis? Are they struggling to talk as they're coming out of it? Or do they look distressed? Yeah, of course. And if the person's sleepwalking, night terrors is a whole different thing. They're going to be screaming usually and making noise. But the thing with sleep paralysis, and I know this has happened because I've had situations where I'm in hotel rooms with family, like we're on vacation or I'm, at a friend's house for the night or whatever. And I will be told, I'll give you a recent example. This was maybe a year ago. My dad and I were at a conference. And so we were in a hotel room. And when I woke up the next day, he said, "Did you have a bad dream last night?" And I have pretty good recall. And I said, "No." And he's like, "You didn't have a bad dream last night?" "No." "Did you sleep well?" "Yeah." And he's like, "Vic, I woke up in the middle of the night and you were extremely distressed and you were
Mm.
trying to scream and you were trying to move." And he said it looked very strange. And he said, "I immediately prayed over you and you took this gasp of breath and then went, oh, and you rolled over and slept soundly." I never would have ever pinpointed that I had sleep paralysis that night or that I'd had a nightmare that night or whatever was going on if there hadn't been an eyewitness to that.
Hmm.
So it did make me wonder, well, how many other times have I had this experience and not known it? How many times have people who have never had sleep paralysis really had it and they just don't know? So to answer that question, how do I know if I have had it or not? There's a few telltale signs. Well, there's a lot of telltale signs, and it can be different for different people. The way that I kind of do it for myself is if I wake up and I know I've been sleeping 6+ hours, sometimes 8, 9, 10, 11, because I've been in this deep, deep sleep, and I wake up and I am absolutely exhausted to the point of feeling drugged. How did I not get a good sleep with that many hours under my belt? I will take a litmus test on my mood. I typically go to bed in a very good mood and I wake up in a good mood. I got a great life. I get to stay at home and books and research, and I just get to sit in my own comfortable home. And I don't have a lot of stress or trauma or drama in my life. And I get up and I get my cup of coffee and I sit at my computer. Like I never wake up in a bad mood. I've got a great life. And if I wake up and I absolutely can't explain why I have high anxiety or I have dread for the day, or there's some sort of emotion that is incongruent to that day's schedule of events, um, there can also be physical manifestations. There have been times where I have woke myself up because my heart is beating so hard and I have sort of fight or flight sort of things going on. You're waking up in a sweat. You're waking up with all the saliva in your mouth dried up, or you're waking up in a sleep paralysis position, like you're supine on your back with your back arched, and you're breathing heavy, or things like that. Um, how the rest of the day goes, um, I look for emotions and feelings and physical manifestations that are incongruent to what happened to me the night before or the day, that are incongruent. I look for the gravitational pull. Something in my life or my mind or my mindset has shifted overnight, and I don't know why. Now, here's another area where it will be different for people with a religious worldview. Uh, when I wake up in the morning and I feel a state of distress and I have no explanation for it, I will pray and I will ask to have, if anything needs to be revealed or remembered. And as I get older, I remember less and less of my dreams. And when I wake up now, I will pray and I will say, Father, if there's anything that I should be or need to be remembering, if I did something in my dream, if I took an oath or a vow, if I did something covenantal, like drinking or eating something, or if I ran into and gave invitation to a nefarious dream character. If there's something I need to remember, bring it to my mind. And usually, um, if I haven't opened my eyes yet, and I'm still kind of in that, I'm awake, but as soon as I wake up and the light hits me, it'll be gone. But I will also notice that sometimes if I pray that and nothing comes to my mind, when I go to bed at night and I'm drifting off to sleep, it'll come back. And I think that's a common
Mm.
experience for a lot of people. The dream you dreamed the night before will come back as you go to sleep the next night. So I recognize that that's not a real thorough answer, but I think, we live every moment of every day in our bodies. We know when a cold is coming on, for example. You get that little trickle in your throat. We know how to read the signs when we're off. All of a sudden we recognize, why do I have anxiety? And then we go through our day and like, oh, that's right, we have a test tomorrow. And we're really good on a moment by moment basis, even if it's subconscious, of evaluating where we are mentally and physically. We know when a cold is coming on. We know when anxiety is creeping up on us. Um, and it's sort of the same thing. If you've dealt with this kind of thing your whole life, and you know what it feels like when you wake up from a sleep paralysis or a mall world experience that you do remember, there's days that you're going to wake up and you're going to have all of those same side effects, but no remembrance of the dream. And it's going to be an indication to you, hey, maybe I had one of those dreams. And so that's where you can test the spirits and where you can cover your bases. And again, the way you're going to cover your bases to come to health and wellness and a sense of balance on those days is going to be different for a religious person via a non-religious person. In the secular world, if you go online, the official narrative is going to be, you know, um, uh, essential oils and breathing exercises and put on nice music and, drink a nice cup of tea and all of that, things that, calming and soothing things. Whereas for a Christian, you're going to make war with it.
Hmm.
You're going to recognize that something came against you, and you're actually going to go into warfare mode. And you're going to instinctively know that a cup of tea or putting some lavender in your diffuser is probably not going to be enough.
Gotta have some rosemary and lavender to fall asleep to keep off the sleep paralysis demons. No, that was a good answer. Thank you. So, like
Mhm.
as you were saying all of this here, I agree, and here at MQuad, we're heavily into, questioning what quote unquote experts say, especially when it defies the logic. And one of our listeners had actually pointed out that the alchemy view is that just because something happens in the material doesn't mean that it's not also happening at the same time in the spiritual, that there's different layers to it all that's happening concurrently. So just because we can fully explain something physically doesn't mean that there isn't an equal parallel going on in the spiritual that we're just not able to comprehend or quantify yet. But I wanted to shift
100%.
yeah, I wanted to shift gears here because as I was reading your book, you emphasized the threshold of a house, and that's where like a lot of sacrifices would occur. And I wanted to, because I was looking at the Epic of Gilgamesh, And this was actually a really subtle nuance I didn't even pick up. Maybe you've already made this connection, but this was a subtle nuance that I hadn't picked up until I was rereading it recently. But it's talking about how, when they're having their visions before they go to fight Humbaba, who's the beast they're going to slay, Gilgamesh, and Enkidu, they make like a dream hut. They talk about like a dream hut for the dream god, make it facing the sun. They put fresh water into a well that they're digging. They climb to the top of a mountain. They pour out an offering onto the mountain. And then Gilgamesh like draws a circle and then lays in the doorway of this dream hut. And then he has these visions of things that are about to happen. And they're pretty terrifying. And like one of them, even it talks about seeing like a spiritual bird called the Anzud bird. And then he sees this mysterious figure that takes it and like fights it. And so it's like you have things like this in like some of our earliest documented stories of humanity. And, it all ties into this, dreams have meaning, and the ancients put emphasis on these dreams and into, maybe it wasn't necessarily sleep paralysis, but it very much seems like, from reading your book that Gilgamesh was attempting to invoke something there and have a very intentional and knowledgeable experience. So I was just wanting to kind of throw that out there and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I love that you brought that up. That is I couldn't have come up with a better parallel there. So yeah, way back in the day when we were an agrarian society, so everybody had their own plot of land and their own home. The cities that were built, in Genesis 6, the Watchers came down and they were really the inventors of the cities. They built the cities and had progeny and named the cities after their progeny. And before that, it was an agrarian society. Everybody had their own plot of land, their own farm, their own garden. And what happened in those societies before there was a city square and there were temples and synagogues and churches and all of that, the home was the temple. And the patriarch of the family was the high priest of the home, and the altar of the home was the threshold. And originally, way back, before there were even tents and whatnot, when they were living in caves, the threshold actually wasn't the doorway. The original threshold was the hearth. It was the fire outside of the house. And even that is a very interesting study in spiritual warfare, that as we move forward in time and as our ignorance of ancient things grows dimmer and dimmer, and as we become more and more susceptible to these beings because of our lack of knowledge, the threshold gets closer and closer and closer to the home, because it used to be the fire outside, and then it turned into, so it was the hearth. Now, if you want to be completely technical, if the hearth is still the altar of the home in, what was it, 16th, 17th century, at some point, the hearth moved inside the house. It moved into the living room. And so now you have the altar of the home over the threshold and into the home. And so if you are at your altar and you are sacrificing your animals to your deity outside of the home on a fire, you now are doing that inside of your home. So the entity that you're worshiping is now already over the threshold into your home. It's a very interesting study. Henry Clay talked about the Threshold Covenant in his book, appropriately named The Threshold Covenant, which you can read online for free. I can't remember if it's Internet Archive or Gutenberg. I believe it's Internet Archive. But so he talks about the threshold of the home being the altar by which the deity of the home was worshipped. And so you'll see this all over historically. You'll see it biblically. There are so many times in the Old Testament in the wilderness that when Yahweh made an appearance and was going to give a message to Moses, it said that all of the men gathered at the doorways of their home, because that was their altars. That was where you would go when you were going to be getting a collective spiritual message. So interestingly too, about the Gilgamesh is it talks about the well, and along with crossroads and doorways and windows. Wells are also liminal spaces, they're portals. And so it's interesting that that was mentioned specifically in that as well. But yes, so the mention of the birds as well. There is a fascinating verse in Revelation that talks about the culmination of all things, where all of the nefarious spiritual entities will be put to ruin. They'll be cast out, and you'll understand the significance of this if you understand Hebrew parallelism. It's all over Scripture. It's not just in poetry. A lot of the Hebrew writing, parallelism is one of their writing techniques. And so they'll say two different things, but it's not a comparison. It is a reiteration. And so in this book in Revelation, when it's talking about the putting away of all spirits and entities that wanted to destroy mankind, it refers to demons and every foul bird. And that's Hebrew parallelism there. The demons and the foul bird. You also see hints of this in Isaiah when it refers to the screech owl, which people understand to be Lilith, which plays directly into the succubus and these sleep paralysis entities. And so you see this symmetry between demons, birds, owls, succubus. Very fascinating. And so another key to him laying down over the threshold of a dream hut. Most people, when they explain they describe their sleep paralysis experience, they will wake up in what they believe to be their bedroom. And many times, not always, sometimes they see the thing on top of them. Sometimes they see like a dark mist in the corner of the ceiling. But I'd say at least 70% of the time, if not more, they see some sort of a shadow person or something with red glowing eyes or a hat man at the bedroom door. And this is very similar to our understanding of vampire mythology, where the vampire comes to the door and it cannot bother you unless it's invited over the threshold. And so we have the same experience in sleep paralysis, where we quote unquote wake up and we see this entity hovering in the threshold of our bedroom door. And it is awaiting a legal invitation, because it cannot harm us unless we give it the invitation. Now, unfortunately, and this is where a lot of Christians unfortunately really get it wrong, is they have this carte blanche idea that because Jesus died on the cross and I prayed a prayer, none of this stuff could ever touch me. And I'm not diminishing what Christ did on the cross or what it means to covenant with him. But the fact of the matter is, we still have to do warfare. The devil prowls, your devil, the adversary, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. And that was a verse that was written after the resurrection. And it's interesting, the lion was the analogy, because lions hunt for their prey in the dark at night. And so there's a lot of analogy going on. So anyway, these things hover at the door like a vampire looking for the invitation. And what people have to realize is there's an overt invitation. Let's say that the entity at the door isn't a shadow man. Let's say it's a little girl, a ghost of the girl that died in the house. Or let's say it's it looks like grandma. Or it looks like the previous owner of the home. An invitation could be, what's your name? Who are you? You know, you're interacting with it. You are engaging it in conversation. But fear is also a type of an invitation, because if you can't control your fear and you are growing in levels of fright to dimensions of terror and levels of terror, they see that as an invitation. That's like a pheromone. That's a draw to them. And so this idea that the only way these entities can bother you is if you do some sort of seance, or you play with the Ouija board, or you go to a graveyard, or you summon these things, that's not true. It's very, very easy to unwittingly give permission to these things. And a lot of
Mhm.
people will note that when they see this thing hovering in their bedroom door, as their fear escalates, it is in tandem with the movement of that entity from the door to the bedside.
Hmm.
And it's almost like that fear is like a magnet drawing them in. So um, the threshold, and I expand upon this in great detail in chapter 4 of my book, Astral and Astral Vampires and Threshold Covenants and Astral Vampires, I think it's called. So that's the chapter a lot of people like. That's all about tying it in with the vampire lore. And I'm actually halfway through another book now that's going to go into a very deep dive between the vampire lore, the very overt spirit spouse covenant language in Nosferatu, along with a lot of these ancient Sumerian and Babylonian and Egyptian texts like Gilgamesh, and the screech owl, and how all of these entities, whether you call it a vampire or a demon or a sleep paralysis entity, these entities are timeless and they are vampiric in nature. And this I come to suck your blood stuff is a very Hollywoodized version of it. They're coming to take more energy or life force. They're coming to not take the soul. It's not like we're going to find people in their bed with 2 fang holes in their neck and they're going to be drained of blood, right? But what you will see is a pattern of people that have had these visitations over the course of their whole life and have had it night after night for decades. You will see a exhaustion. You'll see a lot of autoimmune disease. You will see chronic fatigue. You will see despondency. And you will either see a complete and utter abandonment of all things spiritual and religious, or you will see people going into the realms more of higher consciousness and finding an alternative, more of a Christ consciousness type of a thing, because these visitations are extremely draining of our physical, mental, and spiritual uh, energy. And I know Christians don't like that word energy. You can say soul, you can say life force. I'm not pushing a particular synonym here, people. I'm just saying that even me, guys, I've fought this my whole life. This is not something desired, and it's very, very exhausting, and it at times can be very confusing, and it can be scary. Uh, but I have fought to be sober minded, vigilant, alert, and full of joy. I don't want my um I don't want my personality drained or affected by this, because this is a very vampiric experience when it happens over the years. And you will hear a lot of people, a lot of the targeted individuals, we have a lot in common. Even those of us that are Christians, if they'll be truthful with you, it's very hard to separate what you believe spiritually to be true or biblically true from the pall of darkness that gets kind of injected into your soul when you have too many encounters with these beings. And I know, especially in my youth, in junior high, high school, college, all through my 20s, maybe even into my 30s, and I'm not alone in this, there is a draw towards anything dark, whether it's music, movies, horror movies, a fascination with adrenaline pumping things, even if it's roller coasters or bungee jumping or hanging around in graveyards late at night or writing Gothic poetry or reading Lovecraft. And um, it, even with being raised in a Christian home and knowing lines of demarcation from the very beginning, I drifted very far into the realms of intrigue with darkness, because you do start to feel like, if I've been sought out by these beings and they've shown me these things, it's very hard to explain. And I'm just trying to be vulnerable here and be honest. And the reason why I'm saying this is I think that there's a lot of Christians that don't want to talk about this experience because it has brought them into realms of darkness. And there's aspects of their personality or their thought life or addiction that has come along with it that they're afraid might get exposed. Because unfortunately, the church is really good at, shooting its young, right?
Mm.
And so we really do, I think, need to be more honest about how all encompassing these experiences, how they do affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually in the physical realm. Because I have fought hard to get out from underneath the veil of being intrigued with things that just bring me down and bring despair and negativity. And I battled with 6 very debilitating autoimmune diseases because this
Mm.
does eventually make you physically ill. There are scientific studies out now where they are studying and evaluating UFO abductee experiencers, and a vast majority of them have advanced physical illnesses and a lot of autoimmune
Mm.
diseases, which I believe are very parasitic in nature. And so you just get to a point where you're not a teenager anymore, and you just exhaust yourself with the black hair dye and the black nail polish and all of, the Cradle of Filth t-shirts and going to all the metal concerts and watching the horror movies. And there's a point where you just want your freedom and your vitality and your joy and your hope for your future back. You want your relationships back. You there is a point, hopefully, where you just get to you just get to the place where you're like, I just want my life back. So when I say it's vampiric in nature, I don't just mean we're going to find our relatives dead in their bed with holes in their neck. I mean that mentally, physically, and spiritually, they take your life force away 1 ounce at a time.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that was definitely good insight. So, I mean, like, basically, Gilgamesh kind of laying in the threshold then is almost like saying, hey, you don't need permission. I'm just going to lay here so you can already reach me. And so that's really profound in contrast to your insights there. I wish we had like 3 hours to have a conversation with you because we did a deep dive on Lilith and in her mention in one of the Gilgamesh stories actually, and like that's where a lot of like the stuff with Lilith starts from, at least from my research. But we'll definitely have to get you back on for another conversation. But I want to have Isaiah ask you another question. Then I want to share an experience I had with you and get your opinion on it, and then we'll kind of wrap up the show from there. But go ahead, Isaiah, what you got?
Yeah. So I think I'd heard in another podcast you're on mentioning something about, well, I guess in general in the past they had different views on these sorts of things. Like as our society has become very naturalistic minded in our worldview,
Yeah.
I think medieval Europe, they may have had a different view. And I think you even mentioned something about a different sleep cycle. And I just heard something else about that, where they may have been awake at some point in the middle of the night. So I guess, yeah, what's some more details on how they saw this kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you brought up because I've just been deep diving this lately, and it's so insightful. This is why it's so important to keep history alive and understand that the people in previous generations may have even figured this stuff out. And here we are back to square one, having to figure this stuff out again. What did they know? And a lot of times the clues to what's going on are so disjointed from the actual topic at hand that people don't connect the dots. But it goes by many names. But 2 of the common names are biphasic sleep, or if you're into reading old novels and things, they'll call it the first and second sleep. This is also watches of the night.
Mm.
Now, originally there were 3 watches of the night, but maybe under Roman influence, there were then 4 watches. And I believe if you read in the New Testament, by that point, they had the 4th watch. They had the 4th watch of the night. The 3rd watch of the night is also known in the occult realm as the witching hour, right?
Mm.
And a lot of people with sleep paralysis, they'll talk about seeing these various manifestations or having these experiences between 12 and 3 a.m. Or they'll wake up from one of these experiences and it's either midnight or it's 3:30 or it's 3:33 or something like that. So this is another reason why a lot of lifelong sleep paralysis sufferers are night owls, because most of us, when we were kids, realized that between 12 and 3 there was a lot of activity, and maybe this won't happen if I stay awake. Now obviously you can have sleep paralysis any time of the day, and contrary to even the title of my own book, They Only Come Out at Night, they can come out whenever they want. They can come out whenever you are in an altered state of consciousness or you are in a state of pure exhaustion, or deep grief. A lot of people will have these experiences where they're in grief when a loved one has passed away. If you come home and you crash and you take one of those like hard naps where you sleep for like 3 or 4 hours after work or whatever, that's another classic time for these visitations. But these watches of the night, the third watch of the night between midnight and 3, what's very interesting is, for the official narrative is that this was before the invention of electricity, because then when electricity and the electric light came into being, people stayed up later or they went to bed earlier or whatever. That doesn't really make sense to me, because the people that practice biphasic sleep were up in the middle of the night when it was pitch black outside, and they lit their whole house with fires and candles. And I don't know if you guys have ever lit a candle in pitch black, like if the power's gone out, but there is a lot of power in even just one candle. And so you light your house up with candles, and those people, they were reading by firelight and doing all sorts of stuff. And so these people of old, through many generations, would practice biphasic sleep. So they were still sleeping 8 hours a night. But if you go from sundown to sunup, there's usually 12 hours there. And what they did is they would break up that 12 hours. They would still get 8 hours of sleep, but what they would do is they would go to bed at sundown.
Mm.
So in the winter, this is like 4:35 p.m., right? That's really early to go to bed, but they would go to bed at sundown and they would sleep 3, 4, 5, like usually 3 or 4 hours. They would wake up and stay up, not always between midnight and 3 a.m. exactly. Sometimes it was 10 p.m. to 1 or 2 or whatever. But for the most part, they would stay up during the third watch of the night. And then after about 3 in the morning, they'd go to bed and they'd get their second sleep in, which would be another 4 hours until sunrise. And if you go online and you read about biphasic sleep or first and second sleep, uh, it will talk about how they got up and they cooked or they cleaned the house or they played games or they had family time or they visited neighbors or they had sex. They did whatever they wanted. And but if you get into more of the historical religious literature, there are whole books of prayer over the third watch of the night. There were specific prayers that religious people would get up in the middle of the night and they would perhaps sober mindedly and vigilantly be praying during those 3 hours. And if you read some of those prayers, it's very interesting. There's really specific things that they're praying against. And so it would make me wonder if the ancients figured out, hey, a lot of paranormal activity goes on between midnight and 3 a.m. This is when grandma shows up and the gray activity's on and the sleep paralysis and the sleepwalking and the night terrors. And let's just get up and vigilantly keep watch. In fact,
Mm.
the period of time where they were awake was called the watch. And you can take this into the biblical account of the watchmen who during the watches of the night would be on the walls keeping watch over the city. And so it's interesting to me too, just with the story where the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water. And this was at the beginning of the fourth watch of the night. So this is maybe 6 a.m., maybe dusk. It's just kind of turning into, it's not quite sunrise. They saw at a distance Jesus walking on the water. And these are religious Christian people. I'm saying that facetiously because they weren't Christians, right? These were the disciples. But their immediate response was that they were seeing a ghost, the disembodied spirit of a dead person.
Mhm.
So this was really religious people who had Jesus himself talking to them for years, right? And their immediate cultural and contextual response at about 6 a.m. was, that's got to be a ghost. So it's always been known that these entities, for some reason, prefer those times of the day. Maybe it's because we are asleep and we're in and out of altered states of consciousness. A lot of people who have astral abductions where they're getting pulled into the astral or pulled into the mall world, it is happening within the REM cycle. And I can tell you, just from 40 years of experience, most of the sleep paralysis experiences that I remember is I'm having a dream and there's nothing abnormal about the dream. It's not a scary dream. And in the dream is interrupted and I can feel that ominous presence and the fear rises in me and the vibrational sounds will start hitting my ears and I will start to say something like, oh no, or not again. And uh, a lot of people think that sleep paralysis is, I woke up in my room and I saw this scary entity in my room. And I have a hard time convincing people that the sleep paralysis where you're waking up in the bedroom is, I believe, the very tail end of a much longer paranormal experience that you had that started within the REM dream cycle. So I think that the reason why in the past these entities have sort of defaulted till to the third watch of the night is because it's just easier to get people in REM, easier to get them in altered states of consciousness as they're fading in and out of dream and sleep cycles. But I will tell you that going forward, again, because of technology, when you start mixing all of these frequencies and 5G and binaural beats and brain entrainment and psychotropic medication and psychedelics and all these people who are gaming and the VR headset is on and they're smoking pot and they're doing all of these things simultaneously together, you are not only putting someone into an altered state of consciousness, but you are potentially, depending on how much stuff they're stacking on top of each other at the same time, you're potentially, through technology, putting people into theta states, which is a deep sleep state while people are wide awake. And the younger generations that I'm talking to, as I'm talking to more people from Gen Z, sleep paralysis is going to be an outmoded term very quickly because people are having these same experiences where entities are manifesting. They're seeing the shadow people, the hat men, the red glowing eyes, the phobator type treebeard looking creatures. They're seeing them wide awake in their backyard, in their bedrooms, while they've got the headphones on, listening to the trance music, and they've taken all of their ADD medication and they've got all of their stress. And these things are manifesting because of the confluence of internal and external variables that are actually putting them in altered states of consciousness while they're awake. So I think going forward, even if we started practicing biphasic sleep and we diligently got up at midnight and 3 and prayed spiritual warfare prayers, I think we're entering into a new era with the technology and the frequencies and all of this, where if we don't pick and choose how much of this stuff we interact with, we are going to be susceptible to these things.
That was some good insight. Thank you. Answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah.
Sweet. So I want to run by my experience that I had. This was some years back. I attended Liberty University, so this was back when I was in college. But I had what I want to call a vision, because for a while I was just like, oh, this was just a weird dream or something like that. And so I want to get your take on this and like your interpretation, since you've like studied this and had all sorts of experiences with this, because I've never lucid dreamed, and I usually don't have a lot of like really weird dreams. There's very few that I could count. But this one always stands out to me the most. So I I'd say it's like middle of the day, maybe anywhere between like 12 and like 2:33, and I'm laying on my bed, and I'm on a bunk bed on the top. I have a curtain on my left side that I've like draped up, and then on my right side there's the wall, and at like my right foot there's the window, the top of like the window that we have in the room. And I fall asleep, and normally I'm not a back sleeper, but I was on my back, and I see this really bright light outside, like in my dream. Like there's this super bright light, and it's really windy, and like the blinds are flapping around, and I just feel this like really peaceful, fulfilling presence. Like it is unlike anything I've ever felt before. It was just this amazing, like I can't put it into words, like how amazing this felt. And I'm laying there in this, and I'd only been asleep maybe like 15, 20 minutes or so. And I'm in my head, like at this point, I'm like actually struggling in my faith. So I'm just kind of like laying there, and I'm like, this has to be God, like, right? Like this just feels like it can't be anything else. And so in my mind, I say, God, is that you? And the second I say that in my mind, I wake up, and I'm laying exactly where I was in the room, in the vision. There's no bright light outside. There's no wind flapping, through the blinds. I think the window was even closed. And so it was this really like interesting experience that I just kind of wrote off like, oh, that was just a fluke. But then, in more recent times, I've given more credence to that and talked about it on the show before. And then I noticed in your book that you mentioned with these kind of experiences, you do usually tend to be laying on your back, and that you'll experience a sensation of wind blowing through the room. And then I was looking at a lot of these other things where there's like a sense of like fear and ominous figures. It was that, but the opposite. So I
Hmm.
was just wanting to get your insights on that from your perspectives and research.
Yeah. So interestingly, and there's always outliers, this is not a cookie cutter thing where everybody has the same experience, but between the supine position on your back, the bright light, the window, the peaceful presence, because these things can, especially if it's your first and only experience, people who have had these experiences over the course of their whole life, when these entities come, they will naturally feel dread because they know it's coming.
Hmm.
But if you've never had it before, they will typically, they're trying to lure you in and get that invitation. So the first hit's always free sort of thing. So they might come to you in a more presentable form. And the fact that you said that you're struggling in your faith, they might have seen that as an open door. Let's see if we can dupe this guy into talking to us, and
Hmm.
let's get a legal invitation here. But what's very interesting is you mentioned a bright light at the window. And this is one of the key differences between a sleep paralysis experience and someone who's dealing with like more of what they would call a shadow person or a demon kind of thing. When people have sleep paralysis, they will talk about the darkness of the room and an entity at the door.
Hmm.
And when people talk about being that's like people going in and out of an astral abduction. But when people talk about a UFO abduction, they talk about the window instead of the door. And instead of darkness, they talk about a bright light.
Hmm.
Now, my guess, a lot of people that have sleep paralysis of the dark astral kind, if they start to have an out of body experience, they will usually float upward. And this is why they get us thrown on our back. And if you don't sleep on your back, most people, most of the time, when they have these sleep paralysis experiences, they will wake up on their back. So somehow they got on their back, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the people that experience the grays, uh, they will talk about they're out of floating towards the ceiling. They will talk about being pulled toward the window, pulled out the window instead of the ceiling. It's very interesting. And again, it's outliers. There's people with sleep paralysis that get pulled off the bed and dragged towards the window. And there's people in UFO abductions that are driving in their car when it happens, right? There's always outliers. But whenever you hear the same thing over and over and over again, I just find it fascinating. Like a lot of people that have night terrors also sleepwalk and have lots of unexplained nosebleeds in their waking hours. So that's
Hmm.
strange. A lot of the people that I've talked to who have had lifelong sleep paralysis, um, don't easily breathe out of their nose. They're mouth breathers. And again, there's outliers, but when you hear people say that these same weird things over and over and over again, it's just fascinating to me. So I'm going to just guess, and I'm not a dream interpreter by any means. I'm just going off of the similarities in your story to the things that I've heard repeatedly. My guess is they were trying to see if they could weasel a invitation out of you because you were struggling in your faith. So they thought maybe now's a good time to slip past them, slip one over on them. The fact that you called out to God immediately interrupted that interaction. I'm going to just guess that if you had taken the opposite approach and you'd said, "Hey, who are you? What's going on?" They would have probably flattered you. "You're special. You're a chosen one. We've come to you because you have a gifting." That's the kind of that's the opening line. And if you had fallen for that, my guess is whether you'd remembered it or not, that probably would have culminated in an out of body experience. And you probably would have come back from your nap not really remembering much of what had happened. You would have had some sort of screen memory of that dream. But that sounded a lot more like an alien gray interface than like a shadow man or a succubus or something like that.
That's interesting. So you would be of the mindset that it's probably not so much a godly encounter as it is one of these kind of counterfeits then.
I missed some of that. Did you say that it was probably not a godly encounter?
Yeah, so that just clarifying your interpretation, you would kind of be of the mindset that this is kind of more of a counterfeit than an actual real encounter than with like something like God's presence.
If I had to guess, yes. And this is where there's gray areas because it could have been it it could have been the spirit of God coming to you as a you're struggling with your faith. And what this is how we test the spirits. This is a great example. Let's do it. Let's do this now. Um, God or Jesus never show up just to be seen. Like, hey, he doesn't just show up so we have some cool story to tell around the campfire. There's always a reason why he shows up. It's to help us in some way. It is to reveal himself. Is to reveal something prophetic. It is for the benefit of the body of believers. It is to steer away from deception. And so one of the ways that I would test that experience, test that spirit to know whether it is of God, is you look for the fruit. So in the time that has passed since that has happened, what sort of spiritual fruit did it bear in your life? Did it lead towards deception or confusion? Did it help you in that time of struggling in your faith? Did it put an end to that struggle? And here again, there's so many layers. This is where it gets confusing because these entities are not omniscient and they're not omnipotent. They're not all powerful. They're not all knowing. A lot of times they're taking a crapshoot because they never know what human being is going to react in what way. And so they really are taking a gamble. Some people who have lifelong sleep paralysis get sucked deep and deep and deep into astral theosophical concepts and ideas, whereas other people they might come to who have never had a religious bone in their body and they get so scared and they have such an awakening as to the reality of the spiritual dimensions that they go flying into the hands of Jesus and they become devout believers. So these entities never really know when they come and pester a human being what direction that human being is going to go. They might actually be scoring touchdowns for the opposite team in some cases. And so what's interesting about your scenario is I can see it going either way. And so the way you would test that spirit is the fruit that it bore in your life. Did it bear any intrigue? Did it put you on a path suddenly where you're researching dark things or did it assist in your getting out of that period of struggling in your faith? And sometimes some time has to be laid under our feet before we can fully grasp, okay, what effect, if any, did that experience have on me? And this is why it just takes so much discernment, and why we can't have just a knee-jerk reaction. This is one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm talking to religious people. They'll wake up from a dream and they will instantly have an interpretation to that dream. But if you actually look at scripture, if you look at Daniel and Elijah and John, who wrote Revelation, these people woke up from these prophetic visions consternated, physically ill, totally confused. Daniel was sick for weeks after he had these visions. He was confused. He didn't know what they meant. And a lot of these prophets who had dreams and visions in the Bible died not really even knowing fully the extent of what that dream even meant, because the dream was for a future generation. And so I'm always a little bit leery of people who think that they have a prophetic dream from God, but instantly have all knowledge about what every symbol in the dream meant and who it stood for and what it was. And usually it's some great thing that's going to happen to them personally. There's no sort of vision for the greater glory of God or the benefit of the body of believers. It's just, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to get that music contract. You know what I mean? And so I really do think a lot of these things require a lot of discernment. And I still have dreams that I had that I've written in dream journals that to this day I still don't know what they meant. And I call these my swing away Meryl moments from the Shyamalan movie Signs.
Yeah.
You don't find out very end of that movie why swing away Meryl meant something, and it ended up saving the lives of the whole family. But it was a nonsensical stumbling block through the whole movie for the Mel Gibson character. It was because of the nonsensical confusion of that being his wife's dying words that he wrote off God and all of religion, because how could the dying words of his wife be something so nonsensical? But then in the context of the right moment, her dying words saved her family's life. And a lot of people miss the profundity of that movie. And it fits in so perfectly with the conversation we have now. I do think a lot of times when we do have these dreams and visions, or we get some sort of a prophetic notion of something, if it's coming from God, it's probably not going to be immediately revealed to you what that meant or what effect it had on your life. And sometimes that can be a way to test the spirit. If you wake up and you immediately knew what that was and what it was about, it probably wasn't something prophetic. Because I think a lot of times God makes people work for that. He makes us work that out with fear and trembling. And a lot of people have to do a lot of prayer and soul searching before they figure out. Look at the language barrier and the gap between our knowledge and holiness and the knowledge and holiness of God. And to think, I mean, we can't even talk to the opposite sex or someone from another country without being completely confounded by what the heck they're talking about. You know, there's so many language barriers. And think about how desperately in need of some sort of interpreter we would need if something as big and complex as God gave us a message. I mean, how in the world will we just wake up and go, "Oh, I know what that means"? It's just such a big. It's so much bigger than just what our trivial little minds can grasp. And so, I don't know. It's very interesting. I had a similar experience maybe a year ago, where I was in that hazy, drifting out of sleep, coming out of sleep, and I had this profound feeling of peace come over me. And it was at an exact time that I had been praying and saying, yeah, I was just going through some apathy where I was, reading my Bible and doing all this stuff, but I really wasn't feeling the presence of Christ. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is an answer to my prayer. And just as I was sort of reveling in that, bam, it turned sinister. And my mind was filled with all sorts of grotesque temptations and visualizations. And I woke myself up really quick. And I was very confused because the reality of the peace I felt, I thought, well, how could something evil provide that? So that must have been interrupted by the evil being. Like it was stolen from me, it was hijacked from me. But the more I prayed about it and I talked to other friends, the more I realized it was a counterfeit. And I was devastated because when we're looking for and really needing something from the Lord and he doesn't provide it, and we think we have it and then it's taken from us, then we're kind of back at square one. And I've had that happen to me a couple times. And that's why it's just the fact that our young people are being just taught with no sort of warning labels on social media. Like, hey, this is how your reality shifted. It's super fun. And you can be Harry Potter and you can do this and you can do that. There's no warning labels about that there can be wolves in sheep's clothing, or that there can be physical manifestations that come as a result of toying with some of these things. You can give invitation to vampiric beings. Is it worth it so you can fly around in your dream? Is it worth it so you can play a little VR game at night? And I always just, I point people to the verse. There's a verse in Philippians that says, finally, others, whatever's true, whatever's pure, whatever's noble, right, excellent, praiseworthy, think about such things, and the peace of God, which transcends all human understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And those of us that have these unwanted sleep paralysis, astral abduction, and mall world type experiences, to have a promise from God that he will guard our minds. But the way that we receive that gift is by intentionally taking our thoughts captive and thinking about things that are pure, true, lovely, excellent, admirable. Like we're fixating on things that are pure and true. But I think what's interesting there is one of the things that we're supposed to be meditating on are things that are true. And when you start talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, the dreamscape, liminal spaces, back rooms, mall world, reality shifting, astral projection, and you are creating for yourself a fantasy world, and you are enjoying and feeling more comfortable. You're spending more time in these video games and whatnot because it is a preferred alternative to the boredom and the rigors and the stress of a real life. And in a way, we are sort of being groomed into being lulled into this idea that these dream worlds and these augmented realities are more pleasurable and preferable to reality, because the real world comes with having to work a job and getting sick and dealing with difficult people and drama and trauma and relationship difficulties and hardship. And these augmented realities are free of those things, or so it seems. And I do think that one of the weapons in our arsenal to being lulled into that is thinking about and meditating on what is true about our life. And even if there's aspects of our life that we don't enjoy, we have a difficult life situation, we hate our job, we're from a broken home, we're in the hospital all the time. Even with the sorrows and trials of life, real life is preferable to a fantasy, because when we start moving away from the territory of what is true, we are more easily deceived, because we are going to, even when we're walking through a minefield of red flags and lies, we are more susceptible to buying into it, because it is going to be appealing to the ears. And so I do think that truth is a vital component to staying grounded and being kept from deception, because these entities, these beings, these angels, whatever you want to call them, they are extremely clever. They know our buttons. They know how to push them. Look, we now live in a world of algorithms. If my cell phone knows what I like and what I want to buy, these living, breathing, spiritual beings certainly have me figured out as well, because they're a little bit more clever than my cell phone. And so these things, they know what we want, and they know how to put together the perfect package that is going to be absolutely the most irresistibly tempting to us. And they're going to lull us in whatever way that they can. And the more that we can be rooted in reality and be content with the existence that we have, and we can be sober minded and vigilant and learn to test these spirits to know which ones are of God and which ones are not, the safer we are going to be from deception.
It's a lot of good insights. You've given me a lot to think about on it. I like it. It's a unique take on an experience I thought I had figured out. Isaiah, do you have any final questions before we close out the show for the night?
Sure. Yeah, I guess similar to the question you asked about your experience, although a little different. When I was younger, I guess I had what you would probably call nightmares, bad dreams, but many of them, there would be this sort of terror that I've heard described a lot, but it wouldn't really be tied to anything specific I was seeing in the dream. And it kind of maybe comes on early, or yeah, it's just there. I guess I'm wondering what would you say are the chances that there's a spiritual component to that?
Yeah, there could. What's really interesting about night terrors, which is a very different thing than sleep paralysis. Night terrors and sleep paralysis are not the same thing. Um, and I don't know, Isaiah, if night terrors is what you had, but I'll give a little bit of information on that just for the listener's sake too. Night terrors typically, like I've been saying through the whole show, there's always outliers, right? Typically, night will be experienced by way more boys than girls. It's going to be before puberty and typically stop after puberty. A lot of times, there's going to be, unlike paralyzation and silence and being unable to scream or unable to call on the name of Jesus, night terrors, the kid is screaming bloody murder in his bed, and it'll wake up the whole house, and the parents will come running. A lot of times it's very hard to wake up someone who has night terrors. And typically the next morning they will have no memory of the dream, or they might have a memory of having a nightmare, but they don't have any of the details. They don't remember. And I think similar, this can also be a type of a screen memory. There's two different ways they can get us to forget. They can put a screen memory up and change the memory. So like, oh, I had a dream that a monster was chasing me. Oh, I had a dream I was drowning in a swimming pool, when it was really something much different. And you don't remember the interface that you had with the entity or the being. Another thing that they can do is they can pull a Men in Black on you, and they can wipe your memory. And so you can wake up and you just have no memory of the dream, or you have a portion of the dream that's you remember as scary, but you're not going to remember the vital part of that dream. But I don't want to say something wildly, blanket statement, but the more I study this dreamscape, the more I am thinking a vast majority of it is spiritual.
Hmm.
It's not just your brain defragging at stress at night. The more I study, the more I realize I think it's more profoundly spiritual than I think a vast majority of our dreams are more profoundly spiritual than we understand. And the more I study this, the more I believe that a vast majority of our dreams, whether we realize it or remember it or not, we are interfacing with the spiritual realm. And I think that the same thing can happen on the flip side. Um, I don't know how, a hermeneutics professor in seminary would evaluate this, but I often link Song of Solomon 5:2 with Revelation 3:20. We've got an Old and New Testament. In Song of Solomon 5:2, have bride asleep in bed, and it says the bride was asleep, but her heart was awake. And the bridegroom came to the door, and she heard the knock at the door. Here we go, Gilgamesh, altar, threshold. But this is the bridegroom. This is not a bad guy. This is the bridegroom knocking on the door at night. Why does a bridegroom want to get into his bride's bedroom at night? There's usually one reason for that, right? And but then we fast forward to Revelation 3:20, which unfortunately, because of all of the artwork through the years, Jesus is saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. And so we just envision Jesus at night holding a lantern, knocking on a door like, hey, can I come in? It's cold out here. And I think that is a direct link to the bridal chamber. He's not knocking on our front door because he's looking for an Airbnb for the night. He's knocking on the bed chamber. And I think that these sleep paralysis entities, these vampiric entities that come to the door, that's what they're mimicking. They're mimicking the bridegroom that comes to the door at night. The bridegroom wants to come for intimacy. And I'm not saying Jesus is having sex with us, guys. Like, don't go crazy on me here. What I'm saying is, Jesus, what if Jesus has access to us on a supernatural level when we are in the dreamscape? And likewise, when we wake up, we might not remember the actual dream, but we wake up with this sense of, his mercies are new every morning. We wake up with this sense of joy, or we are anticipating the day, or we wake up with a song in our mouth and we jump out of bed. And what if we are in that sort of a mode because unbeknownst to us, we had some sort of interaction with Jesus? What if he came at the door and knocked on the door and we let him in and we interfaced with him? And so when you look at sleep paralysis, what I have sort of classified it as is if Jesus has the ability to interact with his followers at night and provide a reset for them so that they wake up with joy and rest, then these entities certainly have the ability to mimic that or to hijack or to get to the door first. And so I think in some cases with these nightmares, just plain nightmares, night terrors, and sleep paralysis, whether it's a bad dream, I think that it is possible that these movies that we're kind of seeing in our subconscious at night is a form of dissociation. Because if we know we're interacting with demonic entities, we might be terrified. But likewise, if we know we're interacting with something holy, we would likewise be terrified for a different reason. And because we cannot in our fallen state handle it, I'm thinking of A Few Good Men, we can't handle the truth, right? Because we don't really have the facilities or the faculties, I should say, to interface with the spiritual realm, perhaps all dreams is a very sophisticated veil that is put over our eyes at night so that we are unaware of or not aware of the full implications of who we are interacting with in the dreamscape at night. And I think this is why it is so important to prepare ourselves before we go to bed and prepare ourselves for the day when we wake up. For the vast majority of humanity that gives very little thought into what they dreamed or if they're going to have a good night's sleep, I think that those people are going to be more susceptible to harm. And I think that when it says to be sober-minded and vigilant, your adversary, the devil's a prowling lion, seeking someone to devour, the most vulnerable time we have as human beings is when we're not awake, because we're very vigilant when we're awake. And we know that many of the enemies of humanity and of our soul, they do come out at night because they know that that's when we are the most vulnerable and we're not paying attention. And when we wake up, we're not aware of missing time. We're not aware of our dreams. We're not aware of the missing pieces. And we're not asking questions. And we jump up and all we're thinking about is getting that first cup of coffee or that first Red Bull. And we're already on to very few of us ponder. We spend a good portion of our life asleep. And if we're supposed to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, but we're ignoring a vast majority, if 8 out of the 24 hours of the day we're not even evaluating, we are definitely not going to have all the pieces to the puzzle.
No, I agree. I like that. I like that definition and that idea of a veil almost to be able to interact with the supernatural in a way that's not as scary. That's definitely a good insight. And I agree. You know, if we're spending a third of our life doing this thing, we kind of owe it to ourselves, each individually, to try to figure it out a little bit more. So, Vicki, thank you so much for coming on and joining us tonight for this episode and kind of, you know, helping to shed a little bit of light onto this subject. We'll definitely want to have you back on in the future to talk a little bit more about demonology, because I had some questions on that, but I don't think we'll be able to get to that for the sake of time. But for those of you that are listening that are wanting to hear more of Vicki's work, the link to her website is going to be in the description. You can check that out. And for those of you that also want to purchase her book, that's available at lamarzulli.net. Any closing thoughts you have for us, Vicki, before we finish up here?
No, just thanks, John. It was super fun talking to you. I'd love to come back anytime. And I guess I will add, if people do have issues with this and they're to the end of the rope, you're exhausted, you're confused, you don't know what to do, the harassment is nightly. If you go to the contact tab on my website, VickiJoyAnderson.com, there's a link to a calendar, and you can sign up for what we call a freedom encounter. And my ministry partner, Tom Dunn, and I, we do the Through the Black show Wednesday nights together. We will get on a 40-minute Zoom call with you, and we'll hear your story, and we'll ask questions, and we'll work through it with you. We'll pray at the end if that is important to you or something that you desire. But if you're suffering in this alone, no one believes you, your pastor thinks you're nuts, or your spouse thinks you're schizophrenic, or you're just scared, you've never talked to anyone about this, or you just can't get a good night's sleep, go and check out that calendar link. We'd love to meet with you.
All right, and man, I wish we could have asked so many more questions, but
yeah.
that would have turned into like easily a 6-hour episode. And I don't know. We've officially capped. Last episode we had already capped the M Quad longest episode, and then that topped it even further. But that was good. It was packed with a lot of in-depth information. I like that she brought in the like having knowledge of Greek and combining it with how to interpret texts and understand things, you know, from these ancient texts such as the Bible, respecting the original languages and then inferring context off of that. I thought that's a phenomenal approach. I was like right up my alley. I like how she was talking about Hebrew parallelism. That's definitely a thing we see, especially in Genesis 1, where you have days like 1, 2, and 3, you have light created, and then you have the sky and water created, and then you have plants and land created. And then day 4, 5, and 6 parallels that 1, 2, 3 pattern where the stars are put into the sky to shine the light that's created. And then you have birds and fish created on day 5, and that parallels the sky and waters that are organized.
Yeah.
And then you have the animals created and man created on day 6 that's to live on the land and to tend the plants. So she was definitely spot on and knowledgeable in what she was saying, you know, not just some random person saying their opinions. It's clear she's put in the research to understand things from what I'm seeing here. So, but I will have some thoughts to interject onto her interpretation of my dream. It was kind of funny because I'm like sitting there, I'm just like, man, I'm getting my dream analyzed live right now for everybody to listen to. It's like, I don't mind it, but at the same time, it like feels a little weird. It's like, man, everyone's going to hear this. Like everyone's going to hear an analysis of a dream that I've had. Like, this is weird. But no, there'll definitely be some stuff I want to talk about on that. Probably next episode. Because just for the sake of time here, but I'll probably lead into that next episode when Maddie and I sit down to do that one to add some thoughts to that conversation and to play with the idea a little bit more. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I can't think of too much else for wrap ups. What were your takeaways? Any thoughts? Any contentions, concessions, confessions?
It was a good conversation. Like you said, I wish it wouldn't have ended. There was a lot more to discuss.
Yes.
But it's amazing hearing how so many, or probably all of the cultures in the past had more complex views on this kind of thing than most of our culture does. It really gives a lot of credibility to the whole topic when you see that through history people have been talking about this stuff. Like it's real.
Yeah, and going all like she's tying in and making all sorts of connections from things tying all the way back to Gilgamesh, and it's
Yeah,
like some of the
it's
earliest
incredible.
literature that we have. So this has been an issue and a thing and an approach all throughout human history. And are we really just gonna discard it because modern science can quote unquote explain it away with quote
Yeah.
unquote brain chemistry? It's like, again, the alchemy perspective. Just because there's a materialistic explanation doesn't mean there's not something else going on at the same time. One other thing I will highlight too, I didn't get a chance to mention this during the interview, but she talks about that there's like often a buzzing experience before you like leave your body. And to me, I was thinking about how that sounds like the that would fit with the quantum consciousness, right? Because it's like the
Okay.
electrons in the neurons. It's like an electrical kind of almost like phenomenon
Yeah.
where you're separating in a potentially quantumly entangled state to Astral. And this is just me theorizing
Yeah.
on air here. That this is not a concrete declaration by any means, but but tentatively separating in a quantumly entangled state where you're still in your body but also not. You're both quote unquote dead and alive, both in your body and out of your body at the same time.
The transition phase.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
tethered by that silver cord, that almost electrical cord, maybe even to your body. And so I was just like, looking at that in her book as well, and I'm like, man, this fits perfectly with the quantum consciousness theory, which we've talked about, however many times on the show. Now we've talked about it twice. Maddie and I talked about it, but I think there's something to be said for it. So, but yeah, no. Any other things that you wanted to say before we close out here?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I've got questions that I would have if we had another conversation with her, but
We'll have to get her back on and sit down and have another good episode or two, because I really want to get her perspectives on demonology and Lilith, since she's actually like connected a lot of that stuff. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we ask that you take a minute to share the podcast with someone if you're a dedicated listener. We definitely need some help getting some more listeners. So if you have someone that you think might be interested in the topic, then take a minute and share that with them. And then we'll have some more support for the show. We can do this more often and longer conversations and deeper conversations. If you want to help fund the research, you can buy us a cup of coffee. The link's going to be in the show notes. If you do a $25 donation or more, you're going to get mentioned as a producer for the upcoming show. No pressure to donate, but it does help facilitate and fund the research if you choose to do that. Our Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube handles all m.quad.musings, Facebook's Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix. As always, you can email us with your confessions, concessions, contentions, snide remarks, whatever you like about the show, whatever you don't like about the show, at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. Discord server link is also in the show notes. We're working on building up a community here, the Quad Squad. So if that's your cup of tea and you want to connect with like-minded people, definitely go check that out. And in conclusion here, whether you've been listening on the earth with the mortals and the stars of heaven with Enoch and the cherubim, or down in the depths of Sheol, we thank you for quantumly transcending time to join us for this epic psychology, spiritual journey, discovery that we've been on. And we hope that you have a good rest of your night.